He was just a nameless scavenger, drifting on the edge of survival. But in the ruins of an abandoned mining station, Eli Varn did something that shook the galaxy. He freed an alien slave from her chains. What he didn't know: she was the commander of a deadly fleet, and now the entire galaxy wants him dead. If it were you, would you dare to save her, or let fate swallow everything? Among the cold stars of the galaxy, where alien empires rule through blood and steel, a single human stands against the darkness. Eli Varn, with nothing but his patched-up ship and a reckless heart, stumbled into a destiny far greater than he could ever imagine. The alien woman he saved, Nyra, Starborn of Orales, is not just a fugitive, but the key to awakening a lost fleet, a force that could change the fate of the universe. This is not just a story of survival. It's a story of courage, passion, and a bond that defies the stars. Brace yourself, because what you're about to hear will pull you into a cosmic adventure of danger, fire, and love beyond the edge of space. The air was thick with the stench of rust and despair, a suffocating haze that clung to the walls of the derelict mining station orbiting the gas giant Zarathia. I, Eli Varn, was just a scrappy human scavenger, barely scraping by in the fringes of the galaxy. My ship, a patched-up relic called Starling, was more duct tape than hull, but it was home. That day, I docked at the station to scavenge for spare parts, hoping to score something valuable enough to keep me fed for another month. The place was a ghost town, abandoned by its original owners after the ore veins dried up. Or so I thought. The corridors echoed with the groans of decaying metal, and my boots crunched against the grit of forgotten machinery. My flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows across the walls. I was rummaging through a pile of shattered conduits when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic clinking, like chains dragging across the floor. My heart kicked up a notch. Pirates? Smugglers. I wasn't armed for a fight, just a multi-tool and a stubborn will to survive. But curiosity, that old human flaw, tugged me toward the sound. I crept through the station's lower decks, the clinking growing louder, more desperate. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Then I saw her. In a dimly lit chamber, chained to a rusted bulkhead, was a figure that made my breath catch. She was no human. Her hair, white as starlight, spilled over her shoulders, shimmering even in the faint glow of my flashlight. Pointed ears, sharp and delicate like a fox's, twitched at the sound of my approach. Her clothes, if you could call them that, were tattered furs, barely covering her lithe, almost luminous frame. Her eyes, a piercing violet, locked onto mine, and I swear they burned with something ancient, something fierce. What are you? I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. I'd seen aliens before, hulking traders, insected mechanics, but nothing like her. She didn't answer, just strained against the chains, her wrists raw and bleeding. The sight twisted something in my gut. No one, human or otherwise, deserved to be caged like that. "Hold on," I said, stepping closer, my hands already fumbling with my multi-tool. "I'm getting you out." Her eyes widened, a mix of suspicion and hope, but she stayed silent. The chains were old, brittle, and after a few tense minutes of prying, they snapped apart with a clang that echoed through the chamber. She collapsed forward and I caught her, her weight surprisingly light against me. Her skin was cool, almost electric, and I felt a shiver run through me, not fear, but something else, something I couldn't name. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but resonant, like a melody carried on the wind. "I am Nyra of Orales. You have given me my freedom, human." "Eli," I said, helping her to her feet. "Just Eli. And you're welcome, but we need to get out of here before whoever did this comes back." I didn't know who had chained her or why, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. The station felt alive now, its shadows sharper, its silence heavier. Nyra nodded, her movements graceful despite her weakness. As we made our way back to Starling, she leaned on me, her presence both comforting and unsettling. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped into something much bigger than a simple salvage run. The galaxy was a vast, cruel place, and I was just a speck in it. But as Nyra's violet eyes met mine again, I saw something that made my heart race. A spark of defiance, of gratitude, of something that felt dangerously like destiny. We reached Starling just as the station's alarms blared to life, red lights pulsing through the corridors. "Great," I muttered, shoving Nyra toward the airlock. "Looks like we've got company." I didn't know who was coming, slavers, mercenaries, or something worse, but I knew one thing: I wasn't letting them take her back. Not after I'd seen those chains. The airlock sealed behind us, and I fired up Starling S engines, the old ship groaning in protest. Nyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her hands trembling but her gaze steady. "You do not know what you have done, Eli," she said, her voice carrying a weight I didn't understand. "But you will, in time." I shot her a grin, masking the unease creeping up my spine. "Yeah, well, let's survive this first, then we'll talk about cosmic consequences." The ship lurched forward, and we blasted out of the station's docking bay just as a sleek, black cruiser emerged from the shadows of Zarathia's rings. Its weapons locked onto us, and my dashboard lit up with warnings. Whoever they weren't here to chat. "Hold on tight," I said, gripping the controls. Nyra's hand brushed mine, her touch sparking something warm and reckless in me. Human or alien, it didn't matter. I'd freed her, and now we were in this together, two lost souls against a galaxy that didn't care. As Starling screamed through the void, dodging laser fire, I couldn't help but wonder what I'd just unleashed. Nyra wasn't just an alien slave. She was something more, something powerful. And somehow, I'd just painted a target on my back for saving her. The cruiser gained on us, its engines a low roar in the vacuum of space. I pushed Starling to its limits, weaving through the gas giant's rings, ice and rock exploding around us. Nyra's eyes never left the view screen, her expression unreadable but intense. "They will not stop," she said quietly. "Not until they have me back. Then they're gonna have to go through me," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I didn't know why I was risking my neck for her, but something about Nyra, her strength, her mystery, made me want to fight. For her, for us. The chase was on, and the galaxy was about to learn what happens when a human decides to play hero. The Starling shuddered as another laser blast grazed its hull, the impact sending a tremor through the cockpit. I gripped the controls, my knuckles white, weaving through the glittering debris of Zarathia's rings. The black cruiser was still on our tail, its sleek form cutting through the void like a predator stalking prey. Warning lights flashed across my dashboard, screaming about hull integrity and failing shields. I ignored them. There was no time for doubt, not with Nyra sitting beside me, her violet eyes fixed on the view screen, her presence an anchor in the chaos. "Eli," she said, her voice low, almost a purr, cutting through the blare of alarms. "You fly like a man who's done this before." There was a hint of amusement in her tone, but also something else, something that sent a jolt through me, like a spark igniting dry tinder. I glanced at her, and for a moment, the galaxy's dangers faded. Her white hair, tangled and wild, framed her face like a halo, and the way her fur-clad body leaned slightly toward me made my pulse race in ways that had nothing to do with the chase. "Years of dodging debt collectors," I shot back, forcing a grin to mask the heat creeping up my neck. "You pick up a few tricks." I yanked the controls, sending Starling into a tight spiral to avoid a chunk of ice the size of a house. Nyra braced herself, her hand brushing mine again, and this time it lingered. Her touch was cool, electric, and I swear I felt it ripple through me, waking something I hadn't known was sleeping. "Focus, human," she said, but her lips curved into a faint, teasing smile. It was the kind of smile that could make a man forget he was being hunted by a warship. I shook my head, forcing my eyes back to the view screen. The cruiser was closing in, its weapons charging for another shot. We were outgunned, outclassed, and running out of time. "Any ideas, Nyra?" I asked, my voice tight as I dodged another blast, because I'm about 2 minutes from turning this ship into a very expensive firework. The rings were thinning out, leaving us exposed in open space. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Nyra leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear, and I caught a scent, something wild, like frost and starlight mixed with the faintest hint of spice. "There is a way," she murmured, her voice threading through me like silk, "but it requires trust. Do you trust me, Eli?" Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment the cockpit felt too small, the air too thick. There was a challenge in her gaze, but also a promise, one that made my heart stutter. "Trust a mysterious alien I just met in a creepy space dungeon?" I said, forcing levity into my tone. Sure, why not? But my words didn't match the way my body responded to her nearness, the way her presence seemed to pull me in like gravity. I didn't know her, not really, but something about Nyra made me want to leap into the unknown. She nodded, as if she'd expected my answer, and slid her hands over the co-pilot's console. Her fingers moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic, tapping commands into the outdated interface with a speed that shouldn't have been possible. "This ship," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos, "has a cloaking module. Dormant but functional, I can activate it." I blinked, my brain struggling to keep up. A cloaking module? On Starling? Lady, this ship's lucky to have working lights. But even as I spoke, the console lit up under her touch, ancient systems humming to life. A faint shimmer rippled across the view screen as the cloaking field engaged, bending light around us. The cruiser's sensors faltered, its weapons hesitating as we vanished from their scopes. "How the hell?" I started, but Nyra's finger pressed lightly against my lips, silencing me. The gesture was fleeting, but it sent a shockwave through me, her touch both commanding and impossibly soft. "Later," she said, her voice a low, intimate whisper. "For now, we survive." The cruiser slowed, its crew clearly baffled by our disappearance. I eased Starling into a quiet drift, letting the momentum carry us away from Zarathia's rings. The silence in the cockpit was heavy, charged, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems and the rapid beat of my own heart. Nyra was still close, too close, her body radiating a warmth that seemed to defy the coldness of space. I could feel her gaze on me, studying me, as if she were peeling back layers I didn't even know I had. "You're not just a slave, are you?" I said, my voice quieter now, the adrenaline of the chase giving way to something deeper, more dangerous. "No one knows their way around a junker like this unless they're something else." Nyra's smile returned, slow and enigmatic, like a star emerging from behind a nebula. "You are perceptive, Eli Varn," she said, her voice wrapping around my name like a caress. "I was not always in chains, but my story is long, and this is not the place for it." She leaned back, her fur-clad shoulders brushing against the worn leather of the co-pilot's seat, and I couldn't help but notice the way the light caught the curve of her collarbone, the way her ears twitched slightly as she tilted her head. "Then where is?" I asked, my throat dry. I was treading dangerous ground, and I knew it. The galaxy was full of stories about humans who got too close to aliens, stories that ended in heartbreak or worse. But Nyra wasn't just any alien. There was something about her, something that made me want to know more, to risk everything just to see where this led. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out, her fingers grazing my arm, leaving a trail of warmth that lingered long after her touch was gone. "Somewhere safe," she said finally, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. "Somewhere we can be alone." My breath hitched, and I forced myself to focus on the controls, guiding Starling toward a distant asteroid field where we could hide until the cruiser gave up the chase. But my mind was elsewhere, tangled in the mystery of Nyra, in the way her presence seemed to rewrite the rules of the universe. She wasn't just a fugitive. She was a storm, and I was caught in its pull. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a maze of jagged rocks and silent shadows. I navigated carefully, the cloaking module holding steady thanks to Nyra's impossible skill. But even as we slipped into the safety of the field, I could feel the tension building, not just from the danger outside, but from the unspoken connection growing between us. Nyra's hand rested on the console, inches from mine, and I wondered what it would be like to close that distance, to let myself fall into whatever this was. "Eli," she said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. "You saved me. Why?" There was no accusation in her tone, only curiosity, as if she genuinely couldn't fathom why a human would risk his life for her. I hesitated, searching for an answer that didn't sound reckless or insane. "Because no one deserves to be chained," I said finally, meeting her gaze. "And because, I don't know, something about you feels like it matters, like you matter." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the galaxy's dangers didn't exist. It was just us, two souls adrift in a sea of stars, bound by a moment that felt bigger than both of us. But the moment passed, and the reality of our situation came crashing back. The cruiser was still out there, hunting us, and Nyra's past, whatever it was catching up. "We're not safe yet," she said, her voice firm but laced with something softer, something that made my chest tighten. "But we will be, I promise you that." I nodded, steering Starling deeper into the asteroid field, my mind racing with questions and possibilities. Who was Nyra, really? And what had I got myself into by freeing her? One thing was certain. This wasn't just a chase anymore. It was the beginning of something that could change everything. The asteroid field enveloped us like a labyrinth of stone and shadow, the Starling gliding silently through the jagged maze. The cloaking module hummed softly. A lifeline Nyra had somehow coaxed from my ship's ancient systems. My hands stayed steady on the controls, but my mind was a storm of its own, caught between the thrill of our escape and the electric pull of Nyra's presence. Her words lingered in the air, "We will be safe," a promise that felt both reassuring and ominous. I didn't know what she was capable of, but the way her violet eyes burned with quiet resolve told me she wasn't just running from her past. She was running toward something. "Eli," Nyra said, her voice cutting through the cockpit's tense silence like a blade. "They're scanning the field. The cloak won't hold forever." She leaned over the console, her white hair brushing against my arm, sending a shiver through me despite the danger. Her fingers danced across the controls, pulling up a tactical display I didn't even know Starling had. Red blips pulsed on the screen, the cruiser and two smaller ships, fanning out like wolves circling their prey. "Great," I muttered, my stomach twisting. They brought friends. The black cruiser from before loomed largest on the display, its sleek hull bristling with weapons. The smaller ships were faster, darting through the asteroids with predatory precision. My ship was a scavenger's junker, not a war machine. We were outmatched, and the odds were shrinking by the second. Nyra's gaze didn't waver from the screen, her fox-like ears twitching as if she could hear the hum of the enemy ships through the void. "They are Thalorian hunters," she said, her voice low and edged with something I couldn't place, anger, maybe, or fear. "They serve the Council of Orales. They will not stop until I am returned or dead." I shot her a look, my heart pounding. "The Council? What the hell did you do to piss off an entire alien government?" I kept my tone light, but the question burned. Nyra wasn't just a fugitive. She was a target, and I'd thrown myself into the crosshairs by saving her. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she turned to me, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made the cockpit feel smaller, hotter. "I was their weapon," she said softly, her voice trembling with a mix of pride and pain. "A daughter of Orales, bred for war, bound by their chains, but I broke free, and they cannot forgive that." Before I could press her for more, a deafening screech tore through the ship. The cloaking module flickered, and the tactical display flared red as one of the hunter ships locked onto us. "They've found us," I shouted, slamming the controls to dive behind a massive asteroid. The Starling groaned, its frame shaking as a barrage of plasma bolts scorched the rock we just ducked behind. Shrapnel pinged against the hull, and I cursed under my breath. We were sitting ducks. Nyra's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "Eli, listen to me," she said, her voice urgent, almost commanding. "There's a rift gate in this field, an ancient relic from the Aurelian Wars. If we reach it, we can escape. But it's unstable, dangerous." "Dangerous sounds better than dead," I said, my pulse racing as I plotted a course through the asteroid field. The rift gate was a faint blip on the nav system, half buried in sensor noise. I'd heard stories of gates like that, portals to uncharted systems, relics of long-dead empires. Most spacers called them death traps, but Nyra's certainty, the fire in her eyes, made me believe we had a shot. The hunter ships closed in, their weapons tearing through the asteroids around us. I pushed Starling to its limits, weaving through the chaos, my hands moving on instinct. Nyra was beside me, calling out coordinates, her voice steady even as the ship rocked from near misses. Her presence was a lifeline, her confidence contagious. I didn't know if it was her alien nature or something deeper, but she made me feel like we could outrun the galaxy itself. "There," she shouted, pointing to a faint shimmer in the distance, a tear in space pulsing with violet light. The rift gate. It looked alive, its edges writhing like liquid starlight. But before I could steer toward it, the cruiser fired a massive energy pulse, a wave of blue fire that obliterated an asteroid in our path. The shockwave hit us, throwing Starling into a spin. Alarms blared, and the cockpit lights dimmed as power systems failed. "Hold on," I yelled, fighting the controls to stabilize us. Nyra clung to her seat, her eyes wide but fearless. The rift gate was close now, so close I could feel its pull, a strange hum that vibrated in my bones. But the cruiser was closer, its weapons charging for a killing shot. "Eli," Nyra said, her voice cutting through the chaos. She reached for me, her hand cupping my face, her touch cool and electric. "You saved me once. Let me save you now." Before I could react, she leaned in, her lips brushing mine in a fleeting, searing kiss. It wasn't just a kiss, It was a spark, a supernova, igniting something wild and reckless in me. Time slowed, the galaxy fading until it was just her, just us. Then she pulled back, her eyes blazing with purpose. "Keep flying," she whispered, and before I could protest, she was out of her seat, moving to the rear of the cockpit with a grace that defied the ship's violent shaking. She tore open a panel, revealing a tangle of wires and circuits. "What are you doing?" I shouted, dodging another blast that nearly tore us apart. "Giving us a chance," she said, her hands moving faster than I could follow. Sparks flew as she rewired the ship's core, her fingers dancing through the mess like she'd done it 1,000 times. The cloaking module flickered back to life, stronger now, and the engines roared with a sudden surge of power. "The gate," she called. "Now." I didn't hesitate. I slammed the throttle forward, aiming Starling straight for the rift gate. The hunter ships fired wildly, their shots missing as the cloak held. The gate loomed ahead, its light swallowing us whole. For a moment, everything was silent, weightless, as if the universe itself had paused to watch. Then we were through, spat out into a system I didn't recognize. Stars burned in unfamiliar patterns, and a massive, crystalline planet hung in the distance, its surface shimmering like a jewel. The hunter ships were gone, left behind in the asteroid field. We demade it. Barely. I let out a shaky breath, turning to Nyra. She was still at the panel, her hands trembling from the effort, her fur-clad body glistening with a faint sheen of sweat. "You're full of surprises," I said, my voice hoarse. "Care to tell me what just happened?" She smiled, but it was different this time, sharper, almost dangerous. "You wanted to know who I am, Eli," she said, stepping closer, her voice low and resonant. "I am Nyra of Orales, last of the Starborn, commander of the Lost Fleet. And those hunters, they weren't just after me, they were after what I can do." My heart stopped. "What you can do?" I echoed, the words heavy with implication. The cockpit felt too small again, the air charged with the weight of her revelation. She wasn't just a fugitive. She was a weapon, a leader, a force the galaxy feared. And I just tied my fate to hers. Before I could process it, the view screen flickered, and a new signal appeared, a massive fleet emerging from the shadows of the crystalline planet. Hundreds of ships, sleek and deadly, their hulls glowing with the same violet light as Nyra's eyes. They weren't Thalorian, they weren't hunters, they were hers. "Welcome to my world, Eli," Nyra said, her voice soft but commanding, her gaze never leaving mine. "And welcome to the war." The cockpit of the Starling felt like it had shrunk to the size of a closet, the air thick with the weight of Nyra's words and the impossible sight on the view screen. A fleet, her fleet, stretched across the void, hundreds of ships glinting like blades against the backdrop of the crystalline planet. Their violet glow pulsed in sync with Nyra's eyes, as if the ships themselves were an extension of her. I sat frozen, my hands still gripping the controls, trying to process the fact that the alien I'd freed from chains wasn't just a fugitive. She was a commander, a Starborn, whatever that meant, and I was now neck-deep in her war. Nyra," I said, my voice cracking slightly as I turned to her. "When you said welcome to my world, I was expecting, I don't know, a cool space bar, not a full-on armada." I gestured at the view screen, where the fleet loomed like a cosmic storm waiting to break. "You mind filling in the blanks here? Because I'm starting to feel like the guy who brought a spoon to a gunfight." Nyra's lips twitched, a flicker of amusement breaking through her commanding aura. She stepped closer, her fur-clad form moving with a grace that made my throat dry. "You are, unexpected, Eli Varn," she said, her voice low, almost teasing. "Most humans would be trembling. Yet here you are, making jokes." Her violet eyes held mine, and I swear I felt the temperature in the cockpit spike. There was something about the way she said my name, like it was a secret only she understood, that made my heart do stupid things. "Jokes keep me sane," I said, forcing a grin to cover the fact that my brain was screaming, "What have you gotten yourself into?" "So, this fleet, your fleet, what's the deal? Are they here to throw us a parade? Or are we about to be interrogated for crashing their party?" Before she could answer, the comms crackled to life, and a deep, resonant voice filled the cockpit. "Starborn Nyra, this is Commander Tiva of the Aurelian Vanguard. We have detected your signal, requesting permission to escort you to the Dawnspire." The voice was formal, but there was an edge to it, like Tiva wasn't thrilled about my presence. I glanced at Nyra, raising an eyebrow. Dawnspire? Sounded like the kind of ship that could squash Starling like a bug. Nyra's expression hardened, but her hand brushed mine as she leaned over to respond, sending a jolt through me that was equal parts thrilling and distracting. "Permission granted, Tiva," she said, her tone sharp, authoritative. "Prepare a docking bay for my companion's vessel." She hesitated on the word companion, and I caught a flicker of something in her eyes, uncertainty, maybe, or something softer. It was gone before I could pin it down. "Companion?" I echoed, leaning back in my seat with a mock-offended look. "I save your life, and I'm just a companion. I was hoping for at least heroic rescuer or, dashing human savior." My attempt at humor felt flimsy in the face of the fleet outside, but I needed something to cut through the tension coiling in my gut. Nyra's laugh was soft, almost musical, and it hit me harder than it should have. "You are bold, Eli," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she leaned closer, her white hair brushing against my shoulder. "But be careful. My people are not as forgiving as I am." Her words were a warning, but the way her eyes lingered on me felt like an invitation, one I wasn't sure I was brave or foolish enough to accept. The Starling lurched as a tractor beam locked onto us, pulling us toward the largest ship in the fleet, a massive, sleek vessel that looked like it was carved from the same crystal as the planet below. The Dawnspire. I let the beam do its work, my hands hovering uselessly over the controls. "Guess I'm not driving anymore," I muttered, trying to ignore the way Nyra's proximity was making it hard to think straight. Her scent, frost, starlight, and that faint, spicy edge filled the cockpit, and I had to remind myself we were still in danger. Probably. As we approached the Dawnspire, the docking bay opened like the maw of some cosmic beast, swallowing us whole. The Starling settled onto a pristine platform, surrounded by Aurelian soldiers in shimmering armor, their fox-like ears and violet eyes marking them as Nyra's kin. They stood at attention, but their gazes flicked to me, sharp and suspicious. I felt like a stray dog who'd wandered into a palace. Nyra stood, smoothing her tattered furs, and for the first time, I noticed the way they clung to her, accentuating every curve in a way that was distracting, to say the least. "Come, Eli," she said, her voice firm but warm. "You are under my protection. They will not harm you." She paused, then added with a slight smirk, "Unless you give them reason to." "Comforting," I said, climbing out of my seat and following her to the airlock. "Any tips on not pissing off an alien army? I'm new to this whole guest of the Starborn thing." "Be yourself," she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "It seems to have worked so far." Before I could respond, the airlock hissed open, and we stepped into the Dawnspire's docking bay. The air was crisp, laced with a faint metallic tang, and the soldiers parted to let us pass. At the far end stood Commander Tiva, a tall, imposing figure with hair as white as Nyra's, but eyes that burned with cold authority. "Starborn Nyra," Tiva said, her voice clipped as she bowed slightly. Her gaze slid to me, and I felt like I was being scanned by a laser. "And, the human, why have you brought this outsider to our sanctuary?" I opened my mouth to answer, probably with something sarcastic, but Nyra stepped forward, her presence commanding the room. "Eli Varn freed me from Thalorian chains," she said, her voice ringing with a strength that made the soldiers stand a little straighter. "He is my ally, my rescuer, and he will be treated with respect." Tiva's eyes narrowed, and I could practically feel the disapproval radiating off her. "An ally," she repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. "A human, trusted by the Starborn? This is unprecedented." "Unprecedented is my middle name," I said, unable to resist. Nyra shot me a look that was half warning, half amusement, and I swear I saw one of the soldiers stifle a smirk. Okay, maybe not all of them hated me. Tiva ignored my comment, addressing Nyra. "The Council demands your return, Nyra. They claim you stole the Dawnspire's core, the heart of our fleet. Is this true?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with accusation, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. Nyra's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. "The core was never theirs to claim," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "It belongs to Oralis, to our people. I took it to protect us, not to betray us." I glanced between them, my mind racing. A core? A fleet? A war? This was way above my pay grade. I was a scavenger, not a soldier, and yet here I was, caught in the middle of an alien power struggle. "So, I said, clearing my throat, "this core thing sounds important. Any chance it's not going to get us all killed?" Nyra turned to me, her expression softening for a fraction of a second. "It is the key to our survival," she said, her voice quieter now, meant for me alone. "And it is why they hunt me, why they will hunt you too." "Awesome," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. I've always wanted to be on the galaxy's most wanted list. My attempt at humor felt hollow, but Nyra's faint smile gave me a spark of courage. Whatever this core was, whatever Nyra was, I was in too deep to back out now. Tiva stepped closer, her eyes boring into Nyra. "The Council's hunters are closing in. They detected the rift gate's activation. If you wish to lead us, Starborn, you must prove your worth, and your companion must not interfere." I raised my hands in mock surrender. Interfere? Me? I'm just here for the popcorn. But inside, my gut churned. Nyra was about to face her people, her past, and I had a feeling I was about to be dragged into the fight of my life, whether I was ready or not. As Tiva led us deeper into the Dawnspire, Nyra's hand brushed mine, a fleeting touch that sent my heart racing. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice laced with a promise I couldn't quite decipher. The drama was only beginning, and I had no idea how much deeper this rabbit hole went. The Dawnspire's corridors shimmered with an otherworldly glow, their crystalline walls reflecting light in patterns that danced like liquid stars. I followed Nyra and Commander Tiva through the ship, my boots echoing awkwardly against the polished floor, a stark contrast to the silent grace of the Aurelian soldiers around us. Nyra's whispered words, "Stay close," still lingered in my mind, her fleeting touch burning like a brand on my skin. The tension from Tiva's confrontation hung heavy, but it was Nyra's presence that kept my heart racing, her every glance pulling me deeper into her orbit. I was a scavenger, out of my depth in this alien world, yet something about her made me want to dive in head first, consequences be damned. Tiva led us to a chamber deep within the Dawnspire, a circular room with walls that pulsed faintly, as if alive. "The council chamber awaits," she said, her voice cold as she gestured to a set of towering doors. "The elders will judge your actions, Starborn Nyra, and you're human." Her eyes flicked to me, sharp with disdain, before she turned and left us alone at the threshold. I let out a low whistle, trying to shake off the unease. "Friendly bunch, your people," I said, glancing at Nyra. "Any chance they've got a welcome humans party planned, or is it straight to the interrogation?" Nyra's lips curved into that enigmatic smile of hers, the one that made my pulse skip. "They are cautious," she said, stepping closer, her voice soft but laced with something that sent warmth curling through me. "But they will see what I see in you, Eli. Courage. Loyalty." Her hand brushed my arm, lingering just long enough to make my breath catch. "And something more." I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "You're gonna get me in trouble, saying things like that," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. Her violet eyes held mine, and for a moment, the looming threat of the council, the hunters, the war, it all faded. It was just us, the air between us charged with a heat that felt dangerous, intoxicating. She stepped even closer, her fur-clad body inches from mine, the faint scent of frost and spice wrapping around me like a spell. "Trouble follows you, Eli Varn," she murmured, her voice a velvet caress. "But I find it intriguing." Her fingers traced the edge of my jacket, a slow, deliberate motion that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just the touch, it was the way she looked at me, like I was a puzzle she wanted to unravel, piece by tantalizing piece. I leaned in, drawn by her gravity, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You're playing a dangerous game, Nyra. I'm just a human, remember. Not sure I can keep up with a Starborn." But my body betrayed my words, leaning closer, the space between us shrinking until I could feel the warmth radiating from her. Her laugh was soft, almost a purr, and it sent a rush of heat through me. "You underestimate yourself," she said, her lips so close I could feel her breath against my skin. "You freed me, Eli. You faced the hunters. You are more than you know." Her hand slid up my arm, resting lightly on my chest, and I swear my heart stopped for a second. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken possibilities, the kind that made my thoughts scatter like stars in a supernova. Before I could do something reckless, like close the distance between us, the chamber doors hissed open, shattering the spell. Nyra pulled back, her expression shifting to one of steely resolve, but not before I caught a flicker of something softer in her eyes. "Come," she said, her voice steady but warm. "We face the elders together." I followed her into the council chamber, my head still spinning from her touch, her words, the way she seemed to see right through me. The room was vast, its ceiling a dome of crystal that reflected the light of the distant planet below. 7 Aurelian elders sat in a semicircle, their white hair and violet eyes marking them as Nyra's kin, but their expressions were cold, unyielding. The air was thick with authority, and I felt like a kid who'd wandered into the principal's office, except this principal could probably vaporize me with a thought. "Starborn Nyra," the central elder said, his voice booming through the chamber. "You stand accused of stealing the core of Auralis, defying the council, and bringing an outsider into our sanctuary. Explain yourself." Nyra stepped forward, her posture regal, her tattered furs somehow making her look more like a queen than a fugitive. "The core was never yours to hoard," she said, her voice ringing with defiance. "It is the heart of our people, meant to protect, not control. I took it to save Auralis from your cowardice." The elders murmured, their faces darkening, and I felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't just a trial, it was a showdown, and Nyra was playing for keeps. I shifted uncomfortably, aware of every eye in the room flicking to me, the human who didn't belong. Just to clarify," I said, raising a hand like an idiot in a classroom, "I'm just the guy who broke the chains. Not really up to speed on the cosmic politics here." The elders' glares could have melted steel, but Nyra's soft chuckle cut through the tension. "He speaks truth," she said, glancing at me with a warmth that made my chest tighten. "Eli Varn risked his life for me, a stranger. He is no threat, he is my ally." "Ally?" another elder snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "A human, trusted by the Starborn? You dare bring this creature into our midst, Nyra? What hold does he have over you?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication, and I felt my face heat up. Nyra's hand found mine, her fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that was both protective and bold. "He has no hold," she said, her voice steady but laced with something deeper, something that made the elders lean forward. "He has my trust, my gratitude, and perhaps more." My heart did a backflip, and I'm pretty sure my jaw hit the floor. The elders gasped, their murmurs rising to a crescendo, and I realized Nyra had just dropped a bombshell. In front of her entire council, she'd staked a claim, not just on my allegiance, but on something personal, something that made my pulse race and my thoughts spiral. I wanted to say something clever, but all I managed was a choked, yeah, what she said. The central elder rose, his eyes blazing. "This is unacceptable," he thundered. "A Starborn bound to a human? You disgrace our legacy, Nyra. The core must be returned, and this human must be dealt with." Nyra's grip on my hand tightened, her body pressing closer, and I felt a surge of protectiveness I hadn't expected. "You will not touch him," she said, her voice low and dangerous, a queen defending her own. "Eli is under my protection. Harm him and you face me." The room fell silent, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. Nyra's words weren't just a defense, they were a declaration, one that sent a thrill through me even as it painted a bigger target on my back. The elders exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of shock and calculation, and I knew we were teetering on the edge of something explosive. Before anyone could respond, an alarm blared through the chamber, red lights pulsing across the crystalline walls. "Thalorian signatures detected." A voice shouted over the comms. "Multiple ships approaching the system. They've breached the outer perimeter." Nyra's eyes met mine, and in that moment, I saw not just the Starborn commander, but the woman who'd kissed me in the cockpit, who trusted me when I was just a scavenger with nothing to offer. "They've found us," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "Eli, we need to move. Now." I nodded, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Whatever was coming, I was in it with her. Body, soul, and probably a few bad decisions. As we turned to leave the chamber, her hand still in mine, I couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to get a lot more complicated, and a lot more dangerous. The Dawnspire's council chamber dissolved into chaos as the alarms wailed, their piercing shrieks echoing off the crystalline walls. Nyra's hand was still clasped in mine, her grip firm and grounding as we moved toward the exit, the Aurelian elders shouting orders behind us. The Thalorian ships were closing in, their presence a dark shadow creeping across the system. My heart pounded, not just from the imminent danger, but from Nyra's bold declaration to her people, her words still burning in my mind. "He has my trust, my gratitude, and perhaps more." I was a scavenger, a nobody, yet here I was, tethered to a Starborn commander in a way that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. "Eli, stay with me," Nyra said, her voice cutting through the clamor as we hurried through the Dawnspire's gleaming corridors. Her white hair streamed behind her, catching the light like a comet's tail, and her fur-clad form moved with a purpose that made my chest tighten. I didn't know what was coming, Thalorian hunters, an angry council, or something worse, but with her beside me, I felt like I could face anything. Or at least fake it convincingly. We reached the command deck, a vast chamber filled with Aurelian officers at sleek consoles, their violet eyes darting between holographic displays. The view screen dominated the room, showing the crystalline planet below and the approaching Thalorian fleet, dozens of ships, their black hulls bristling with weapons, cutting through space like knives through silk. Commander Tiva stood at the center, barking orders, her earlier disdain for me replaced by a laser-focused intensity. "Prepare the Dawnspire for combat," she commanded. "Shields to maximum, ready the pulse cannons." I glanced at Nyra, expecting her to take charge, but she hesitated, her gaze fixed on the view screen. There was something in her expression, doubt, maybe, or fear, that I hadn't seen before. "Nyra," I said softly, stepping closer. "You okay? This is your fleet, right? Time to show these hunters who's boss." She turned to me, her violet eyes searching mine. And for a moment, the chaos of the command deck faded. "It's not that simple, Eli," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "The core, it's more than a power source. It's me." Her words hit like a shockwave, and I felt the air leave my lungs. Before I could ask what she meant, she took my hand, pulling me toward a side alcove, away from the prying eyes of the crew. "Nyra, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice urgent as we stood in the dim light of the alcove. Her hand was still in mine, her touch a lifeline in the storm of confusion. "The core is some kind of superweapon, right? Not you." She shook her head, her fox-like ears twitching as she leaned closer, her breath warm against my cheek. "I am the core, Eli," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of defiance and vulnerability. "The Starborn are not just commanders. We are the heart of Oralis, bonded to its power. When I stole the core, I didn't take an object. I took myself, my essence, my connection to the fleet. That's why they hunt me. That's why they'll never stop." My mind reeled, struggling to process the twist. Nyra wasn't just a leader. She was the literal soul of this fleet, a living conduit for its power. The weight of it crashed over me, and I realized why the Council was so desperate to control her, why the Thalorians were relentless. She wasn't just a person, she was a weapon, a goddess, a force that could reshape the galaxy. And I, a scrappy human scavenger, had stumbled into the center of it all. "You're telling me you're some kind of cosmic battery," I said, my voice cracking as I tried to wrap my head around it. "And you didn't think to mention this when we were dodging lasers in my junker." Her lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes were heavy with something unspoken. "I didn't know if you'd believe me," she said, her fingers tightening around mine. "Or if you'd run." Her voice softened, and she stepped closer, her body so close I could feel the heat radiating from her, the faint scent of frost and spice wrapping around me. "But you didn't run, Eli. You stayed, you fought for me." My heart thudded, the air between us charged with a tension that was both thrilling and dangerous. "Yeah, well," I said, my voice rough, "I'm not exactly known for making smart choices." I wanted to say more, to ask 1,000 questions, but the way she looked at me, vulnerable, fierce, alive, made words feel inadequate. I reached out, brushing a strand of her white hair behind her ear, my fingers grazing the soft, pointed edge of it. Her breath hitched, and for a moment I thought she might close the distance between us again, like she had in the cockpit. But the moment shattered as the Dawnspire rocked violently, a deep boom reverberating through the ship. Direct hit. An officer shouted from the command deck. "Thalorian flagship has breached our outer defenses." Nyra's eyes snapped to the view screen, her vulnerability replaced by a commander's resolve. "They've come for me," she said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "Eli, I need you to trust me one more time." She pulled me back toward the command deck, her hand still in mine, and I followed, my head spinning with the weight of her revelation. The view screen showed the Thalorian flagship, a monstrous vessel, its hull pulsing with red light, leading a swarm of smaller ships. They were firing relentlessly, their plasma bolts tearing through the Dawnspire's shields. Tiva spun to face Nyra, her expression a mix of frustration and desperation. "Starborn, we need the core's power to repel them," she said. "Without it, we cannot hold." Nyra's jaw tightened, and I realized what Tiva was asking, not for a machine, but for Nyra herself. "What does that mean?" I demanded, stepping forward, my voice sharper than I intended. You plug her into some kind of cosmic outlet. She's not a tool, Tiva. Tiva's eyes narrowed, but Nyra placed a hand on my chest, stopping me. It's my choice, Eli, she said, her voice calm but resolute. The core's power flows through me. If I connect to the Dawnspire systems, I can amplify our defenses, our weapons. But it comes at a cost. A cost, I echoed, my stomach twisting. What kind of cost? She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes, pain, determination, sacrifice, told me everything. Whatever she was about to do, it could hurt her, maybe even kill her. No way, I said, shaking my head. There's got to be another option. We can outrun them, like we did in the asteroid field. There's no running from this, Nyra said, her voice soft but unyielding. She stepped closer to a central console, its surface glowing with intricate runes. This is my fight, Eli, but I need you with me. Will you stay? I wanted to argue, to drag her back to the Starling and fly us both to some forgotten corner of the galaxy. But her eyes held mine, and I saw the truth. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her people, for Orales, for something bigger than both of us. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. But you'd better come back from this, Nyra. I'm not done with you yet. Her smile was small but radiant, and she leaned in, her lips brushing my cheek in a fleeting, electric touch. Nor I with you, she whispered, before turning to the console. She placed her hands on the runes, and the air around her shimmered, her body glowing with the same violet light as the fleet outside. The Dawnspire hummed to life, its weapons firing with a ferocity that shook the deck. The Thalorian flagship faltered, its shields buckling under the onslaught, but I couldn't tear my eyes from Nyra. Her face was serene, but her hands trembled, and I saw the strain in her eyes, the cost she hadn't spoken of. The twist, that she was the core, a living weapon, changed everything. And as the battle raged, I realized I wasn't just fighting for her life. I was fighting for her soul. The Dawnspire's command deck vibrated with the raw power surging through its systems, a symphony of energy that seemed to pulse in time with Nyra's heartbeat. She stood at the central console, her hands pressed against the glowing runes, her body radiating a violet light that made her look like a goddess carved from starlight. But her trembling fingers and the faint strain in her eyes betrayed the toll this connection was taking. The revelation that she was the core, her essence the key to the fleet's power, still spun in my mind like a rogue asteroid. I was just Eli Varn, a scavenger with a knack for bad decisions, yet here I was, standing by her side as the galaxy's fate hung in the balance. The viewscreen blazed with the chaos of battle. The Thalorian flagship reeled under the Dawnspire's amplified assault, its shields flickering like a dying star, but their smaller ships were relentless, darting through the crystalline planet's orbit like wasps. Explosions lit the void, and the deck shook as a stray plasma bolt grazed our hull. Commander Tiva barked orders to the Aurelian crew, her voice sharp but fraying at the edges. "Redirect power to the forward shields," she shouted. "Protect the Starborn at all costs." I stood close to Nyra, my hand hovering near her shoulder, wanting to pull her away from the console but knowing I couldn't. "Nyra," I said, my voice low, urgent, "you're killing yourself. There's got to be another way." Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a moment I saw the woman who'd kissed me in the cockpit, not the weapon her people had made her. But she shook her head, her white hair shimmering with the effort of maintaining the core's connection. "This is my purpose, Eli," she said, her voice steady despite the strain. "I was born for this, but you," she paused, a flicker of something soft breaking through her resolve. "You make me want to be more." My heart did a ridiculous flip, and I swear I forgot how to breathe for a second. "Yeah, well," I said, forcing a grin to hide the panic clawing at me, "you're not getting rid of me that easily. I didn't survive a space chase just to watch you burn out like a cheap engine." My attempt at humor felt flimsy, but her lips twitched, and that small gesture gave me hope. Before she could respond, the deck lurched violently, throwing me against the console. Nyra steadied me, her hand gripping my arm, her touch sending a jolt through me even in the midst of chaos. "Careful, human," she said, her voice laced with a teasing edge that made my face heat up. "I need you in one piece." "Working on it," I muttered, righting myself as the alarms blared louder. The viewscreen showed a new threat. A Thalorian boarding craft had latched onto the Dawnspire's hull, its drills cutting through like a predator's claws. Tiva spun toward us, her violet eyes blazing. "Intruders in Sector 7, she snapped. Starborn, we need you to maintain the core's power. I'll handle the boarders. Nyra nodded, but I saw the strain deepening in her face, the way her shoulders tensed as the core's energy coursed through her. I'm going with Tiva, I said, the words out before I could think them through. You're not fighting this alone. Nyra's eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she'd argue. But then she leaned in, her lips brushing my ear, her voice a soft, urgent whisper. Be careful, Eli, you're more important to me than you know. The words hit like a shockwave, and before I could respond, she pulled back, her gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my chest ache. Tiva, unfortunately, had no time for our moment. Human, if you insist on joining us, try not to get in the way, she said, tossing me a sleek Aurelian pulse pistol. I caught it, fumbling slightly, and gave her a mock salute. Don't worry, Commander, I'm practically a professional at not dying. Her glare could have melted steel, but I caught a flicker of amusement in one of the nearby officers' eyes. At least someone appreciated my charm. I followed Tiva and a squad of Aurelian soldiers through the Dawnspire's corridors, the pulse pistol feeling foreign in my hands. The ship groaned as the Thalorian boarders breached the hull, their heavy boots echoing in the distance. My stomach churned, but Nyra's words kept me moving. You're more important to me than you know. Damn it, she was going to be the death of me, or the reason I kept fighting. We reached Sector 7, a maintenance bay filled with crates and machinery, now crawling with Thalorian soldiers. They were hulking figures, their armor black and spiked, their faces hidden behind visors that glowed red. Tiva signaled for us to take cover, and I ducked behind a crate, my heart pounding. Okay, Eli, I muttered to myself, time to prove you're not just a guy with a rusty ship. The fight erupted in a blaze of light and sound. Tiva moved like a storm, her pulse rifle firing precise shots that dropped Thalorians with terrifying efficiency. I aimed my pistol, my hands shaking, and fired. The shot went wide, scorching a crate instead of a soldier. Nice one, human, Tiva shouted, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she took down another enemy. Perhaps aim for the enemy next time. Working on it, I yelled back, firing again. This time, I hit a Thalorian's shoulder, sending him staggering. I grinned, feeling a rush of adrenaline. See, I'm a natural. The battle was chaos, a blur of plasma bolts and clashing metal. I fought alongside the Aurelians, my human clumsiness a stark contrast to their grace, but I held my own, barely. Then a Thalorian officer, larger than the rest, charged me, his vibroblade humming with deadly energy. I dove behind a crate, narrowly avoiding a swing that sliced clean through the metal. Oh, come on, I shouted, scrambling to my feet. I'm just the sidekick here. Tiva appeared like a shadow, her rifle blasting the officer back, but not before he hurled a grenade. It landed near me, its red light pulsing ominously. Time slowed, and I acted on instinct, grabbing the grenade and lobbing it back. It exploded midair, the shockwave knocking me flat. My ears rang, and for a moment I thought I was done for. Eli. Tiva's voice cut through the haze, and I blinked up to see her standing over me, her expression a mix of annoyance and grudging respect. You're still alive. Impressive. Tell me about it, I groaned, sitting up. The bay was secure, the last of the Thalorians down, but the ship shook again, a reminder that the battle outside was far from over. I staggered to my feet, my pulse pistol still clutched in my hand, and caught Tiva staring at me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Why do you fight for her? She asked, her voice quieter now, almost curious. You're human, this isn't your war. I hesitated, thinking of Nyra. Her strength, her vulnerability, the way she made me feel like I could take on the galaxy. Because she's worth it, I said simply, and Tiva's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected that. Before she could respond, the comms crackled. Starborn Nyra requests your presence on the command deck, an officer's voice said. The Thalorian flagship is retreating, but the core is destabilizing. My heart dropped. Nyra. I sprinted back toward the command deck, Tiva's footsteps behind me, the awkwardness of our earlier exchange forgotten. The corridors blurred past, my mind racing with fear for Nyra. The core was her life, her essence, and if it was destabilizing, what did that mean for her? I burst onto the command deck to find Nyra slumped against the console, her face pale, her violet light flickering. The crew worked frantically around her, but her eyes found mine, and she smiled weakly. Eli, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You're back. I knelt beside her, my heart in my throat. I told you I'm not going anywhere, I said, taking her hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. The drama of the moment was overwhelming, but I clung to humor to keep from breaking. You're not allowed to check out on me, Nyra. We've got a galaxy to save, remember. Her laugh was faint, but it was there, and it gave me hope. But the twist of her being the core, and the cost it was taking, loomed larger than ever. The battle wasn't over, and neither was our fight. The command deck of the Dawnspire buzzed with frantic energy, but to me, it was all a blur. Nyra's hand was cold in mine, her violet light dimming like a star on the verge of collapse. Her face, pale and drawn, still held that fierce determination I'd come to admire. But the strain of being the core, the living heart of the Aurelian fleet, was etched into every line of her expression. The Thalorian flagship had retreated, its red glow fading into the void, but the cost was clear. Nyra was fading, and I wasn't sure I could bear to lose her, not after everything we'd been through. Nyra, I said, my voice rough with emotion as I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of white hair from her face. You've done enough. Let go of the core. Let someone else carry it. My words felt desperate, but I didn't care. The thought of her slipping away, consumed by the very power she wielded, was a knife in my chest. I was just a scavenger, a nobody in the grand scheme of the galaxy, but she'd made me feel like I could be more. I wasn't ready to let that go. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting mine with a warmth that cut through the chaos. Eli, she whispered, her voice faint but steady, you've carried me this far, don't stop now. Her fingers tightened around mine, and despite her weakness, there was a spark in her gaze. A spark that reminded me of the woman who'd teased me in the cockpit, who'd fought beside me against impossible odds. Commander Tiva's voice broke through, sharp and urgent. Starborn, the core's energy is destabilizing the Dawnspire systems. If you don't disconnect, the ship could tear itself apart. She stood over us, her earlier disdain replaced by a grudging respect, but her eyes were wide with worry. The crew worked feverishly at their consoles, holographic displays flashing warnings as the ship groaned under the strain. I looked at Nyra, my heart pounding. You heard her, I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the fear clawing at me. No blowing up the fancy alien ship on my watch. I've got a reputation to maintain. My attempt at humor felt hollow, but Nyra's lips curved into a faint smile, and that was enough to keep me going. She nodded, her fox-like ears twitching slightly. I can sever the connection, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But it requires balance. The core needs an anchor, something to ground its power. Her eyes flicked to me, and I felt a chill, not of fear, but of something deeper, something that felt like destiny. An anchor? I asked, my brow furrowing. What does that mean? You're not about to plug me into this thing, are you? I gestured at the glowing console, half joking, but the intensity in her gaze told me this was no laughing matter. Not like that, she said, her smile softening. The core is tied to my essence, but it can be shared with someone I trust, someone who matters. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and I felt my breath catch. She wasn't just talking about saving the ship. She was talking about us. Tiva stepped forward, her expression a mix of skepticism and urgency. Starborn, you cannot mean to bond the core with a human, she said, her voice sharp. It's unprecedented, dangerous. Everything about this is unprecedented, Nyra shot back, her voice gaining strength. Eli freed me, he fought for me, he is my choice. Her eyes never left mine, and I felt the weight of her words, the trust behind them like a star igniting in my chest. Okay, I said, swallowing hard. Tell me what to do. I'm not letting you do this alone. My voice was steadier than I felt, but for her, I'd face anything, even becoming part of some cosmic power source I barely understood. Nyra guided my hand to the console, her touch gentle but firm. Place your hand here, she said, her fingers overlapping mine on the runes. The moment our hands connected, a surge of energy flowed through me, warm and electric, like standing in the heart of a nebula. I gasped, my vision swimming with violet light, and I felt her, Nyra, her strength, her courage, her essence, weaving into mine. It was overwhelming, intimate, like our souls were touching across the vastness of space. The Dawnspire stabilized, its alarms falling silent as the core's energy found balance. The crew let out a collective breath, and Tiva stared at us, her expression unreadable. It's holding, she said, almost reluctantly. The human is anchoring the core. Nyra's hand tightened around mine, and she leaned closer, her forehead resting against mine. Thank you, Eli, she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. "You've saved me again." I grinned, despite the fact that my head was still spinning from whatever cosmic connection we'd just forged. "Yeah, well, you owe me a drink after this," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "Maybe two." Her laugh was soft, melodic, and it filled the emptiness I hadn't realized was there. The battle was over, the Thalorians gone, but the war wasn't. The council, the hunters, they'd come for Nyra again, and now for me. But as I looked into her violet eyes, I knew I'd fight for her, for us, no matter what the galaxy threw our way. Days later, the Dawnspire orbited the crystalline planet, its fleet standing guard. Nyra and I stood on an observation deck, the stars stretching out before us like an endless promise. Her fur-clad shoulder brushed against mine, and I felt the now familiar warmth of her presence, amplified by the bond we shared through the core. It wasn't just a power source, it was a connection, a bridge between a human and a Starborn, something no one in the galaxy had ever seen. "So," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "what's next for the great Starborn Nyra and her trusty human sidekick?" I kept my tone light, but my heart was pounding. The future was uncertain, but with her, it felt like anything was possible. Nyra turned to me, her smile radiant, her pointed ears twitching with amusement. "Sidekick," she teased, stepping closer until the space between us was barely a breath. "You are far more than that, Eli Varn." Her hand found mine, and she leaned in, her lips brushing mine in a kiss that was soft, deliberate, and full of promise. It wasn't the desperate spark of the cockpit or the fleeting touch of the alcove. It was a beginning, a vow. I kissed her back, my hands finding her waist, the galaxy fading until it was just us, two souls bound by something bigger than ourselves. When we pulled apart, her eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and determination. "The council will come," she said, her voice steady. "The Thalorians will regroup, but with you by my side, we will face them. Together, we can rebuild Orales, make it a beacon of hope, not control." I nodded, my grin widening. "Sounds like a plan. Just don't expect me to wear those fancy furs. I'm more of a worn-out jacket guy." Her laugh rang out, bright and free, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The Starling was still parked in the docking bay, a reminder of my old life, but I wasn't that scavenger anymore. I was Eli Varn, anchor to the core, partner to a Starborn, and ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store. As we stood together, watching the stars, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the start of something new. A human and an alien, a fleet and a dream, a love that could light up the void. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and full of secrets, but with Nyra by my side, I was ready to write our story among the stars. The story of Eli Varn and Starborn Nyra is only the beginning. A promise forged between two souls from different worlds, standing together against the shadows of the galaxy. If this journey ignited your imagination, hit like to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe to X-Aurel and ring the bell so you won't miss the next epic HFY adventure. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think awaits Eli and Nyra? Share your ideas in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Your support fuels our stories. Until next time, keep your eyes on the stars because the next chapter is coming.